Good evening. And here we are once again for Tales and Cocktails. This evening I want to read for you an excerpt, from Sir Thomas Mallory's MORTE d'Arthur. The title of the book is misleading, for the death of Arthur is only a small part of the total volume. The stories begin with the birth of Arthur and follow his reign through to the end. And this story is taken from Book 1, chapters 3, 4, and 5. Then within 2 years King Uther fell sick of a great malady, and in the meanwhile his enemies usurped upon him, and did a great battle upon his men, and slew many of his people. Sir, said Merlin, you may not lie as you do, for you must to the field, though you ride in a horse litter. For you shall never have the better of your enemies, but if your person be there, and then shall you have the victory. So it was done as Merlin had devised, and they carried the king forth in a horse litter, with a great host toward his enemies. And at St. Albans there met with the king a great host of the north. And that day Sir Ulfius and Sir Brastias did great deeds of arms, and King Uther's men overcame the northern battle, and slew much people, and put the remnant to flight. And then the king returned to London, and made great joy of his victory. And within a while after, he was passing sore sick, so that 3 days and 3 nights he was speechless. Wherefore all the barons made great sorrow, and asked Merlin what counsel were best. There is none other remedy, said Merlin, but God will have his will. But look ye, that all the barons be before him tomorrow, and God and I shall make him to speak. So on the morrow all the barons with Merlin came before the king. Then Merlin said aloud unto King Uther, Sir, shall your son Arthur be king after your days in this realm, with all the appurtenances? Then Uther Pendragon turned him and said in hearing of them all, I give him God's blessing and mine, and bid him pray for my soul, and righteously and worshipfully that he claim the crown upon forfeiture of my blessing. And therewith he yielded up the ghost. And then he was interred as belonged unto a king, wherefore Igraine, the queen, made great sorrow, and all the barons. Then stood the realm in great jeopardy a long while, for every lord that was mighty of men made him strong, and many weened to have been king. Then Merlin went to the Archbishop of Canterbury, and counselled him to send for all the lords of the realm, and all the gentlemen of arms, that they should come to London before Christmas, upon pain of cursing. And for this cause, that as Jesus was born on that night, that he would of his great mercy show some miracle as he was come to be king of all mankind, for to show some miracle who should be rightwise king of this realm. So the archbishop, by the advice of Merlin, sent for all the lords and gentlemen of arms, that they should come by Christmas Eve to London, and many of them made clean of their lives, that their prayer might be the more acceptable to God. So in the greatest church of London, all the estates and lords were long or it were day in the church for to pray. And when matins and the first mass was done, there was seen in the churchyard, against the high altar, a great stone, 4 square, like to a marble of steel, like to a marble stone, and in the midst thereof was an anvil of steel, a foot of height, and therein stuck a fair sword, naked by the point, and letters of gold were written about the sword that said thus, Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is rightwise king born of England. Then the people marveled and told of it to the archbishop. I command you, said the archbishop, that you keep you within your church and pray until God still, that no man Pray unto God still that no man touch the sword till the high mass be all done. So when all the masses were done, all the estates went for to behold the stone and the sword. And when they saw the scripture, some assayed, such as would have been king, but none might stir the sword, nor move it. He is not yet here, said the archbishop, that shall achieve the sword, but doubt not God will make him to be known. But this is my counsel, said the archbishop, that we let pervade 10 knights, men of good fame, and they to keep this sword. And so it was ordained. And then there was made a cry that every man should essay that would afford to win the sword. And upon New Year's Day, the barons let make a joust and tournament, that all knights that would joust and tourney there might play. And all this is ordained for to keep the lords together, and the commons, for the archbishop trusted that God would make him known that should win the sword. So upon New Year's Day, when the service was done, the barons rode to the field, some to joust and some to tourney. And so it happened that Sir Ector, who had great livelihood about London, rode to the jousts, and with him rode Sir Kay, his son, and young Arthur, that was his nourished brother. And Sir Kay was made knight at Allhallowmass afore. So as they rode toward the jousts, Sir Kay had lost his sword, for he had left it at his father's lodging. And so he prayed young Arthur to ride for his sword. I will with a good will, said Arthur, and rode fast after the sword. And when he came home, the lady and all were gone out to see the jousting. Then was Arthur wrath, and said to himself, I will ride to the churchyard, and take the sword with me that sticketh in the stone, for my brother Sir Kay shall not be without a sword this day. And so, when he came to the churchyard, Arthur alighted, and tied his horse to the stile, and so went to the tent, and found no knights there, for they were all at the jousting. And so he handled the sword by the handles, and lightly and fiercely he pulled it out of the stone, and took his horse, and rode his way till he came to his brother Sir Kay, and delivered him the sword. And as soon as Sir Kay saw the sword, he wist well that it was the sword of the stone. And so he rode to his father, Sir Ector, and said, Sir, lo, here is the sword of the stone. Wherefore I must be king of this land. When Sir Ector beheld the sword, he returned again and came to the church. And there they alighted all three, and went into the church. And anon he made Sir Kay to swear upon a book how he came by that sword. Sir, said Sir Kay, by my brother Arthur, for he brought it to me. How gat you this sword? Said Sir Ector to Arthur. Sir, I will tell you. When I came home for my brother's sword, I found nobody at home for to deliver me his sword. And so I thought my brother, Sir Kay, should not be swordless. And so I came thither eagerly and pulled it out of the stone without any pain. Found you any knights about this sword? Said Sir Ector. Nay, said Arthur. Now, said Sir Ector to Arthur, I understand that you must be king of this land. Wherefore I, said Arthur, and for what cause? Sir, said Sir Ector, for God will have it so. And there should never no man have drawn out this sword, but he that shall be rightwise king of this land. Now let me see whether he can put the sword there as it was, and pull it out again. That is no mastery, said Arthur, and so he put it in the stone. Therewith Sir Ector essayed to pull out the sword, and failed. Now essay you, said Sir Ector to Sir Kay, and anon he pulled at the sword with all his might, but it would not be. Now shall ye essay, said Sir Ector to Arthur. With a good will, said Arthur, and pulled it out easily. And therewithal Sir Ector kneeled down to the earth, and Sir Kay also. Alas, said Arthur, mine own dear father and my brother, why kneel you to me? Nay, nay, my lord Arthur, it is not so. I was never your father, nor of your blood, but I wot well that you are of a higher blood than I weened you were. And then Sir Ector told him all, how he was betaken him to nourish, and by whose commandment, and by Merlin's deliverance. Then Arthur made great moan when he understood that Sir Ector was not his father. Sir, said Sir Ector unto Arthur, will you be my good and gracious lord when you are king? Else were I to blame, said Arthur, for you are the man in the world that I am most beholden unto, and my good lady and mother, your wife, that, as well as her own, hath fostered and kept me. And if ever it be God's will that I be king, as you say, you shall desire of me what I may do, and I shall not fail you. God forbid I should fail you. Sir, said Sir Ector, I will ask no more of you, but that you will make my son, your fostered brother, Sir Kay, seneschal of all your lands. That shall be done, sir, said Arthur, and more by the faith of my body, and that never man shall have that office but he, while he and I live. Therewithal they went unto the archbishop, and told him how the sword was achieved, and by whom. And upon the 12th day, all the barons came thither for to assay to take the sword, who that would assay. But there before them all, there might none take it out, but only Arthur. Wherefore there were many great lords wrath, and said it was great shame unto them all and the realm to be governed with a boy of no high blood born. And so they tell it, they fell out at that time, that it was put off till Candlemas, and then all the barons should meet there again. But always the 10 knights were ordained for to watch the sword both day and night, and so they set a pavilion over the stone and the sword, and 5 always watched. And at Candlemas many more great lords came thither for to have won the sword, but none of them might prevail. And right as Arthur did at Christmas, he did at Candlemas, and pulled out the sword easily, whereof the barons were sore aggrieved, and put it in delay till the high feast of Easter. And as Arthur sped before, so did he at Easter. And yet there were some of the great lords had indignation that Arthur should be their king, and put it off in delay till the feast of Pentecost. Then the Archbishop of Canterbury, by Merlin's providence, let purvey of the best knights that might be gotten, and such knights as King Uther Pendragon loved best, and most trusted in his days. And such knights were put about Arthur, as Sir Bondwine of Britain, Sir Kay, Sir Ulfius, and Sir Brastias. All these with many others were always about Arthur day and night, till the feast of Pentecost. And at the feast of Pentecost all manner of men assayed for to pull at the sword that would assay, and none might prevail but Arthur. And he pulled it out before all the lords and commons that were there, wherefore all the commons cried at once, We will have Arthur under our king. We will put him no more in delay, for we all see that it is God's will that he shall be our king. And who that holdeth against it, we shall slay him. And therewithal they all kneeled down at once, and cried Arthur mercy, because they had delayed him so long. And Arthur forgave it them, and took the sword between both his hands, and offered it up to the altar, where the archbishop was, and was made knight of the best man that was there. And so anon was the coronation made, and there was he sworn to the lords and commons for to be a true king, to stand with true justice from thenceforth all the days of his life. And then he made all the lords that held off the crown to come in and do him service as they ought to do. And many complaints were made unto King Arthur of great wrongs that were done since the death of King Uther Pendragon, of many lands that were bereaved of lords, knights, ladies, and gentlemen. Wherefore King Arthur made the lands for to be rendered again unto them that owned them. When this was done, that the king had established all the countries about London, then he did make Sir Kay seneschal of England, and Sir Boudwine of Britain was made constable, and Sir Ulfius was made chamberlain, and Sir Brastias was made warden, for to wait upon the north from Trent forward, for it was at that time, for the most part, enemy unto the king. But within few years after, King Arthur won all the north, Scotland, and all that were under their obeisance. Also a part of Wales held against King Arthur, but he overcame them all, as he did the remnant, and all through the noble prowess of himself and his knights of the Round Table. And that is the excerpt from books, 3, 4, and 5? 3, 4, and 5 of the Morte d'Arthur by Sir Thomas Mallory. I love it. I hope you've enjoyed it, my dear. I absolutely love it. Anyway, that is Tales and Cocktails for tonight. And now to decide what on earth to read to you next week. Hopefully I will see you next Wednesday at 6 for Tales and Cocktails. Thank you for being with me. Good night.